Election Day, March 28th, 2022. First item I have on tonight's agenda is a resolution to authorize the issuance of a then and now certificate to pay for an invoiced Interface Video Productions. I suspect we probably ought to pay this or they're going to take all their camera gear and leave. So I believe this is coming through the Service Safety Director. Obviously, the bill came, or we need to pay the bill before you created the purchase order.
Yes, sorry for this little snafu.
Well, a couple of them in there tonight, so that's all right.
Yeah, well, this one's directly related to me, as you said.
Well, there it is. All right, Interface, you are going to get paid, and we're even going to suspend on this, so you can tell Bob to take a chill pill. So this is part of the cable franchise agreement, is that right?
Yes, we actually, they don't invoice us, and I think that was the snafu. We actually get the checks in per the contract. We issue out the percentage of that, so.
Yep.
Sorry, we
No
got
worries.
this worked out. We got a plan for next year and already thinking ahead.
Perfect. We'll ask for suspension on this since it's a then and now. And Mrs. Kreitz, will you be the second, please?
Yes.
Awesome. So we will suspend on 4922. Moving right along to Resolution 5022. That's a resolution authorizing the city to apply for the Meals on Wheels Older Adult Alternatives of Fairfield County 2023 grant. This is coming through Public Works. Mr. Schoonover. That was not hard or not easy to say.
This is a annual piece. The transit department applies for a grant through Meals on Wheels, something they've received last few years in a row. So we're going to just ask for suspension so they can apply for this grant.
All right, any questions for Mr. Schoonover on this? All right, and your second is Mr. James?
That's correct.
All right, we'll ask for suspension on 5022. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Next item I have is Resolution 5222. That is a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the Tiki Lane Pump Station renovation project. This is coming through Water Pollution. Mr. James?
Yes, I would like to invite Ms. Denise Cruz for a little more of an explanation on this expenditure, a request for expenditure.
Good evening. Our projects roll on. This is a request to enter into an engineering contract for the Tiki Road Booster Station. This is located opposite Tiki Pools on Tiki Lane. It fills the Rainbow Drive water tank and provides pressure out into the northeast section of the city there. The pump station was built in the early 1990s, so it's obviously at the end of its life and needs several upgrades. So this will get us started on that project, and it is being paid for by the ARPA funds that you so generously gave us.
Well,
And
what would you like to do?
We'll go 2 readings on that, and Ms. Teener will be my second.
Okay, so we'll go 2 readings on 5222.
Thank
Very
you.
good, thank you. Next item I have is Resolution 5322. It's a resolution to authorize a then and now certificate to pay an invoice to the Arlo Steel Corporation coming through Public Works. And Mr. Hintz is there to fall on his sword, right?
The second snafu you referenced.
Yeah,
Could
second
be.
time in 2 months.
Hi, Greg.
I apologize again for being here. To be honest with you, somewhere along the line, don't know where the invoice went. It ended up showing up in February 14th, Valentine's Day. So, regardless, I'm here. I'd ask for then and now to get this bill paid.
How big of a bill are we talking about? Just,
$9,000. It's.
oh, there it is,
Yeah.
$9,000.
Yeah,
And some change.
so it was for stock steel for to rebuild some of the slide-in stands that we put salt hoppers on for the trucks.
Any questions for Mr. Hintz? Nice you to drive down here to confess your sins. I assume you want suspension on that?
Please.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, Corey, I assume we'll suspend on 53.
Yes.
Thanks, Greg.
All right.
Moving on, we're 5422. That's a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the design of the East Main Street Culvert Replacement Project coming through Water Pollution. Mr. James.
Thank you, Chairman Stoughton. Actually, I'd like to invite Stephen Wellstead to the podium to give us a little more explanation of what this project entails.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Tom. So yeah, this project upcoming here in the Stormwater Department will be to upsize two culverts under East Main Street, US 22 there on the east side, one right at Sells Road, and then one about 750 feet east. Both are undersized and do cause some flooding issues on the north side of Main Street during those large rain events. And the state route paving program through the state is coming in 2025 and looking to pave. So the thought is, let's get these new culverts designed to the current standards, get those in before the paving in 2025. So the first step would be to get our engineering contract and get up and design. So that's what we're asking here for. $85,000 contract to get started on that.
Any questions from Mr. Wellstead?
Steve, on the south side of Main Street where both those culverts come out from underneath, there's ditches there. Are those city right-of-way, those ditches where the water flows after that?
No, that's, there are some easements. Those culverts were put in, I think, like 1970, when there was a big improvement along that stretch of Main Street. And we do have some easements, I believe, based on some preliminary research our consultant has done. But no, that flows onto private property and then to Pleasant
I asked
Run there.
Because they're grown up with a lot of brush.
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
gonna
both of them are
hamper the
tough to
flow of
find.
water anyways.
Yeah.
I didn't know if this project could get that cleaned up as well.
We'd have to look at it again. We would need obviously to have the legal ability to do so, and we do have some easement, but I don't know how far that stretches to the stream there.
Further questions? Seeing none, Mr. James?
That'll go 2 readings, and Ms. Teener will be my second on that one as well.
Very good, thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
2 readings on 5422. Moving right along to 5522, that's a resolution to appropriate from the 3 mil Street Improvement Fund 2009. This is coming through Public Works. Mr. Schoonover.
Craig's back up.
I'm back. This was money that we expended last year during some of the projects that we were reimbursed. Like on the STP project, we were reimbursed to 5%. On the OPWC project last year, we were reimbursed to 26%. All that totaled was $119,627. We received the check and it's been paid in with discussions with engineering. We'd like to go ahead and reappropriate that back into the 2022 project, which is getting ready to start. And that just gives us a little bit of a cushion. Not much, a little.
You always say that, but we always come in under the number every year, so.
Well, we are tight this year, so. But I'd like to have suspension if possible, so we can get this into the budget and keep right on moving.
Sure, any questions for Mr. Hintz on this? Always like when we get money back and can put it back towards the 3 months. So
Absolutely.
we'll ask for suspension, and your second is?
Ms. Sitterly.
Ms. Sitterly. Very good. All right, thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Suspension on 5522. Moving right along, Resolution 5622, that's a resolution to authorize alternative composition of Lancaster City Council. This is coming through the Law Committee. Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, this resolution actually goes along with the question that's on the primary ballot on whether or not we will have that additional at-large council representative. And if it is passed, then this resolution will go forward.
Okay, any questions on that? I don't think any of that's a surprise to anyone. What's our timing on that? Oh, you gotta, yeah, have to have
We
an
have-
election.
We do.
There we go. All right. So we will ask for 2 readings and then put it on the table on the 3rd. So, very good. Thank you. Second on that is Mrs. Teener, and that'll be okay since she should be here the next time. Next item is 5722. That's a resolution to amend Permanent Resolution 3322, authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of pipe and fittings for the Division of Water. This is coming through water pollution. Mr. James.
Thank you, Chairman Stoughton. Actually, I'd like to invite Denise Cruz back to the podium to give us a little more explanation of this.
So based on Resolution 3322, we advertised for bids for water, for pipe and fittings for the Division of Water. The bids came in over the authorized contract amount, but within the 10% that's allowed under the Ohio Revised Code. So this ordinance will allow us to actually enter into a contract. It's we've asked for a little bit more money because like every other supply chain issue we have, costs are escalating. And we pay the price that is, and the shipping at the time that it is shipped. So we've added a little bit more money in case prices go up, but the sooner we can enter into this contract, the sooner we can fix the prices.
Okay, so just higher priced stuff. Are you here in lieu of Mr. Drum, or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
She's a lot better looking than Mr. Griffin.
goes without saying, but the law director's now cringing because now you're in some sort of trouble. But,
I'm there perpetually.
all right, very good. So what's your pleasure on this?
We will ask for suspension tonight, and Mr. Matlin will be my second in the absence of Becky Teener.
Very good. Someday these prices will go down. So very good. Thanks, Denise.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Next item is 5822, and that's a resolution authorizing the city to apply for funding from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. This is coming through the Service Committee. Ms. Sitterly.
Thank you. Did Linda sneak it? Oh, Mike, would you like to fill us in on this one?
Good evening. Yeah, this is our grant writer, Linda, has been busy at work last year and a half or so. AHA Trails Project is an educational trails behind the AHA building on city property. Total project is about a $661,000 project. So far, we've received $43,000 Nature Works grant. We just got word last week we received $50,000 from the Fairfield Foundation. This is an application for $150,000. It takes about $200,000 to get us through phase one. Again, total projects is $661,000, and I do believe we've applied for capital budget money to kind of make up the difference. Paul's shaking his head yes. So that's kind of, in the grand scheme of things, we're just asking permission to apply for another $150,000 so we can get phase one underway.
Questions for Mr. Tharp? I just have one. I mean, what's the likelihood of us getting this, or do we know?
Linda,
Do we have a,
I'm the messenger.
Well, we applied for it 2 years ago and didn't get it, so we're hoping to get some good feedback from that application, make a better application. It's the same project, so, fingers crossed. But we also now have a lobbying firm on our team as well, so they can hopefully get some recon for us this is the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, so hopefully we can find out what was, shorten our application last time and make it better.
yeah, no, I just, in some cases, it seems like we know these things are slam dunks, and sometimes we don't, so this must not be one of them.
No,
Okay,
but not a terrible stretch. I mean,
No.
it's a recreational trails program, so it's a good fit for the program. Maybe this will be our year.
But it's also educational as well, right?
Yes.
An educational component about it, which ODNR is really interested in. Hopefully, I think so.
well, anyway, here's one thing for certain. You don't get 100% of the grants you don't apply for, so, right?
This is true.
This is true. All right, further questions? Ms. Sitterly, what's your pleasure?
I think since we are addressing it at this meeting, we can do 2 readings, seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Okay. So we'll go 2 readings on 5822. All right, next item I have is 5922. That's a resolution approving participation in the One Ohio Region 15 governance structure under the One Ohio Memorandum of Understanding and to declare an emergency, coming through the Law Committee. Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, this resolution is to approve the city's participation in the appointment of Law Director Stephanie Hall to the governance structure, and it's related to the opioid litigation, and the group will determine what projects will be funded by the settlement monies over the next 20 years. We need 2 readings so that we can meet the April deadline.
Okay. Questions on this? I have a couple. So I see we have a 7-county region. I mean, how much, remind us, doesn't this money have to go to specifically to opioid interdiction and things like that?
Yeah, so there are 2 pots of money, one that will come directly to the city of Lancaster based on the formula that was in the lawsuit, in the One Ohio lawsuit and settlement. And then the other pot of money goes to the One Ohio Recovery Foundation. And the One Ohio Recovery Foundation is gonna be made up of 19 different regions, and we're one of those regions. And this is to get our structure in place so that we can send somebody to the One Ohio Recovery Foundation Board. We're allowed to send one member, and that member goes, and then that group controls that other pot of money, where it goes in terms of opioid abatement. But there's specifically 4 pages in the settlement that are dedicated to the types of abatement, which is basically anything rationally related to treatment, interdiction, recovery, all of those types of things.
Okay. Any other questions for her on this? All right, very good, thank you. What's your pleasure on that again?
2 readings, please.
2 readings on 5922. Next item I have is ordinance 1522. That is an ordinance authorizing the law director to acquire 25-year easements from the state of Ohio at Ohio University Lancaster. This is coming through, I don't know, Public Works. Mr. Schoonover.
Yes, thank you. I haven't been around long enough for the previous 15-year one, but so apparently 15 years has turned into 25. Seems self-explanatory, but if Stephanie would want to fill us in, or Denise.
So this is an existing water line that serves the university and then over to State Route 37. The state does not grant easements, they only grant licenses, and the licenses have to be renewed. So this is just one of those renewals.
How many parcels is this?
Just
Believe it.
one. It's one parcel, but there's actually 2 easements on the parcel.
Okay. And for a whopping $1,530, which I find to be an odd number, but that's just,
Yeah. 15 years for $1, and now we're gonna get 25 years for $1,500.
let's go back to the 15-year one for $1.
I know, but that's not my choice. Unfortunately, the state of Ohio tells me what we get. So,
That's government for you, right?
yeah.
It makes imperfect sense, always.
I don't know that we can do that, but.
Look at Bob doing the bidding for Ohio University. There's a surprise.
No, he's on the other side, yeah.
Cut the water off.
Well, why don't you straighten stuff out down there with all your friends in Athens and get all this stuff cleaned up? All right. Corey, what is that, 3 readings?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll go
No.
3 readings.
I don't
One-
know. Yeah,
one
we need
reading.
suspension. I'm sorry, I don't know how that got.
It's probably me, not you.
It's
I-
on,
I
it's on
apologize.
On the
this
agenda,
one.
it says 1.
Does it?
On
The state has been sending
tonight's
emails
agenda, not
saying, when
yours,
are you
yeah.
going to do this?
Yeah, and they didn't get it to us in time for the last meeting, and so it's kind of a rush now, but I apologize. Both Denise and I were like, oh, it's the state of Ohio, they're never in a hurry to do anything. But the last easement expired, and so now they're in a hurry to get
course.
something else in place, so.
Well, then who's your second on that then?
Ms. Sitterly.
I mean, I completely butchered this piece on my agenda, so
He didn't.
don't listen to me. All right,
Yeah.
moving on. Thank you. Are there any departmental updates this evening? Oh, I thought we were good.
Oh, Mitch.
Yeah, here comes Mitch.
We got a few. Good evening. So this coming month or so, we're going to be getting started on some paving projects. So got some exciting news. 6th Avenue was bid out. Strauser Paving is the contractor that's going to be doing that for us this year. They did Pierce Avenue several years ago. $712,000. That's a 95-5 split. And our 2022 street improvement program it's a big one this year. We're at about 1.762 million on this one. That's where Greg was talking about. We're gonna be running a little thin this year. So we've selected quite a few alternate streets. Almost all of them, the ones that specifically Walnut Street, which adjoins High Street there. It would be East Walnut, and multiple streets over on the west side. I can get you a complete listing of that if you need. But it's a large program. It's about 75,000 square yards, which is probably the largest program we've ever done. Also, we have the OPWC funding that we were selected for this year. which is South High Street from Main to Canal, and then also Perry Street. And that's $743,000 was the grant total on that, and that's gonna be a 74-26 split. And we're hoping to do that this year as well. And one more project that we're still trying to work through the details, but Linda and my office have been working with Corpo, and we received the $182,000 for the South Broad Street Gateway project, which is, there's multiple things happening there. There's sidewalk improvements as well as it will look like a resurfacing project. It's mainly for the pavement markings. We weren't able to grind off or hydroblast off the pavement markings because we would have delaminated the microsurfacing. So we've got to mill that stuff off so that we can change around some pavement markings and do some different things for parking on the street and some bike lanes and whatnot. So, but it's a $182,000 grant from Corpo. So 4 projects there. Trying to squeeze them all in this year. We'll see how that goes with our Corpo funding and how quickly we can get through the federal process. But some exciting projects. A lot of orange barrels will be out coming here in the next few weeks, so be prepared.
Couple questions for you.
Okay.
So the paving project, did that pick up all 16 streets then from the plan we got back in November?
It picked up all the streets, so what the plan that I gave you, the only ones that we're not able to do is the Hawthorne, Cold Spring, Whittier sections back there.
Okay.
But all the other alternates
Yep.
have been picked up.
Okay, fantastic. Second question, remind me, 6th Avenue goes to Maple this year?
Yes, North Memorial to Maple, correct.
All right,
And then the following year will be from Maple to Cherry.
excellent. Any questions for Mitch? Very good, thank you, sir. Any other departmental updates? Not to be outdone, another engineer comes to the podium.
Not a stormwater update, but an update on behalf of the Water Department regarding the future North Water Treatment Plant project there in Miller Park. You may recall from Valentine's Day, there was legislation for an engineering amendment to install a test well for that future plant. Well, that well is in, and they do have some minor things they need to do to get ready for the well test that we're doing. That'll be done the week of April 18th. Just to determine officially what the yield of the aquifer there will be, and that will help us determine whether we need 4 or 5 wells for the new plant. So just wanted to give you an update on that there.
Perfect. Any questions for Stephen on that? Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Further departmental updates? Going once, twice, gone. So with that, we'll move on to President Newell for tonight's meeting prep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have several things to work through still during this time in the meeting. Temporary Resolution 51-22 to file for an annual transit grant from ODOT coming through Public Works. Mr. Schoonover.
Similar to the Meals on Wheels grant, these are the grants that transit applies for every year through the state. Because they're annual pieces and it makes up a huge chunk of their yearly budget, we're going to be asking for suspension tonight so we can get started on those.
All right, so suspension on 51-22. Who's your second?
Ms. Sitterly?
Ms. Sitterly then to second. Any questions about 51-22? If not, we'll move to temporary ordinance 13-22, an ordinance to accept .775 acres of vacant land from Table Mountain Industries coming through economic development. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, this legislation will allow us to accept the .775 acres from Table Mountain Industries. It's part of Project Mustang, and this will be property on the west side of Wiley Road. We need a little bit more room for right-of-way improvements, easements there, so this would allow us to get that, and this legislation allows us to accept it at no charge.
Very good. And what's your pleasure on this?
2 readings, and Mr. Schoonover second.
All right, 2 readings on 13-22 with Mr. Schoonover second. Any questions for Mr. McDaniel about this? If not, we move to 14-22, an ordinance to accept a permanent general utility easement coming through Public Works. Mr. Schoonover.
This is part of the Bowers Park development out, West Fair, I guess that's considered what?
Wilson Road.
Wilson
West
Road,
Fair, right
there you go.
So yes, this is the easement we need to extend the water line from the current city limits out to Bauer Park. Superintendent Drum has been in contact with the property owners and has negotiated this easement, and we are ready to move forward.
Very good. What's your pleasure, Mr. Schoonover?
Mine says 2 readings, are you fine with that? Need
All
2
right.
readings.
2 readings on 1422. Who's your second?
Mr. James.
Mr. James to second that one. Any questions for Denise or Mr. Schoonover? Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Denise. All right, in addition to those items, if you'll note on temporary resolution 44-22, because Ms. Teener is not here tonight, Mr. Matlin, will you second that one? Thank you. We already took care of the other one during first readings that she was assigned to. Also note 2 other things very quickly. One, there will be a motion in new business to allow the clerk to attend the 2022 required Sunshine Law training for members of council who are not in their first term. We always request that the members of council who are in their first term to take that training. It's very good the first time out. Then in subsequent terms, if you're continuing on with this, you'll have the opportunity to have Ms. Sandy sit in for you. So Mr. Schoonover will be making that motion during new business. The other thing that we'll need to do, and you're going to have to help me out, Law Director Hall, I'm supposed to appoint Mr. Stoughton to something to which name I do not remember. Tax increment.
Yes.
Something.
Tax incentive review council.
Tax incentive review.
I already did that. I don't have to do it again.
So
Council.
You previously did, but we are re-upping, and so.
And this being a
President
presidential
Gould-
appointment.
Yes, President.
That does not require the approval of city council, so we'll
come
simply be
on.
entering it into the record
Oh.
during new business as my appointment. Congratulations. Thank you for your willingness to serve.
I guess I should stop sending you bad texts, shouldn't I?
Yes. No, don't do that. I like your texts. All right, those are the things that we will be addressing during the meeting and in new business. That's all I have. I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, sir. Any other items for finance? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
And a
Second? Second?
Second. We are adjourned.
Very good. It is gotta go to the bathroom. It's 6:27. We'll begin at approximately 6:30, probably a couple minutes after.
Life is unpredictable. That's why estate planning is important. Estate planning provides you comfort and peace of mind knowing that you're taking care of your loved ones and ensuring your legacy lives on just as you envisioned. You lived a life that is beautifully and uniquely yours. You deserve an estate planning attorney who understands that and creates a plan as unique as you and in the best interest of your loved ones. You deserve the local, trusted, experienced attorneys at Dagger Law.
There is no place like Lancaster, Ohio, and Fairfield County, and like you, I am proud to call them home. As a longtime resident of Lancaster and graduate of Lancaster High School, this community is important to me, and I want to provide superior customer service, professionalism, integrity, and honesty at the Connor Insurance Agency. I am committed to supporting local programs and projects through my volunteer work and board membership with several organizations. It has been a great honor to work with all the first responders throughout Lancaster, Fairfield County, and the state of Ohio to put on Kids and Cops Day, to be a part of Shop with a Cop alongside the Lancaster Police Department and JFS, and to help Lancaster Public Education Foundation raise funds to support our local public schools and teachers. These men and women work hard to protect and support our community, and I would like to take this moment to say thank you for all they do. My goal as a business owner and insurance agent is to provide my clients with the most appropriate services and coverage for their needs at a competitive rate. As an independent agent, I have several carriers to choose from so I can customize your insurance coverage to fit your needs and desires. I strive to make sure there are no gaps in your coverage that could be harmful, and just as important, that you are not overinsured. I look forward to serving your insurance needs now and in the future. At Connor Insurance, we are here to serve you by protecting what is important to you. Please contact my office at 740-654-2848 for a full list of services and carriers, or visit my website, ConnorInsuranceAgency.com.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Good evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Before we gavel each of these meetings to order, a prayer is traditionally offered. This has been a decades-long tradition and is codified in the rules of council. The purpose of this ceremonial prayer is to put those who are here, and particularly the members of Lancaster City Council, in a contemplative and reflective mindset, so that we are together prepared to undertake the work that is set before us. It's meant to help us all understand the gravity of what we're doing here and why we have been elected, which is to serve the people. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a person of faith. My faith is in Jesus, but that's my faith, and I realize that there are those here tonight and those watching on TV or the live stream who don't believe as I do. That fact is not lost on me. As president of council and per the rules of council, I'll continue to offer prayer as I see fit before the legislative body convenes. Tonight, however, I've chosen to offer a moment of inspiration as opposed to a traditional prayer. So I hope that you will join me in a reflective and contemplative attitude. We're gathered here tonight as elected officials and community leaders because the people of Lancaster have put their trust and confidence in us to serve with honor. May none of us take lightly this sacred trust that has been placed in us. As we go about the work before us tonight, may we continue to remember that we are here to serve, and may we do all the good we can, by all the means we can, in all the ways we can, in all the places we can, at all the times that we can, to all the people that we can, for long as ever we can. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Here.
Mr. James?
Here.
Mr. Matlin?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
Ms. Sitterly?
Here.
Mr. Stoughton?
Here.
And Ms. Teener.
Let the record reflect that 8 of 9 members of Lancaster City Council are in attendance tonight. Reading and disposing of the journal.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to excuse Ms. Teener.
Oh, well, yeah, we can do that if you want. Second. There's a motion and a second to excuse Ms. Teener. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Ms. Teener is excused. Now reading and disposing of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated March 14th, 2022.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
There are two. Email dated March 25th, 2022 regarding temporary resolution 54-22 submitted by Stephen Wellstead, Stormwater Manager, and an email dated March 27th, 2022 regarding finance agenda submitted by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There are none to be presented.
As we have been for the last several weeks, we tonight welcome a guest to present to Lancaster City Council, and I'm pleased to welcome Amanda Everett. Ms. Everett is the Executive Director of Destination Downtown Lancaster and the Downtown Lancaster Special Improvement District, and she's here to provide an update not only on their annual gathering that was held just this past week, but also what's happening this spring. So thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. We had an incredible annual gathering this past Thursday celebrating Destination Downtown Lancaster and the Special Improvement District, and it was extraordinarily meaningful because we were unable to celebrate 2020 accomplishments in 2021 because of the pandemic. So we had a lot of catching up to do, and we've got a lot of fantastic and amazing things. The downtown specifically, and I believe Lancaster on a whole, has done really well through this pandemic compared to some other communities. And I think it speaks to the quality of the community that we've come through in the strength of fashion that we have. So some of the highlights from a social media perspective, we have almost 18,000 followers across 3 different platforms. So folks are hearing about the work, interested in the events, seeing what our businesses are doing, and that's nationwide. We were able to award over $13,000 in matching grant funds through the Special Improvement District for Special Improvement District property owners who were investing in facade improvements and making sure that they could beautify those buildings and increase the property value. We were able to raise over $14,000 in partnership with the Fairfield County Foundation in our second 250 plates community table event. And those funds were dispersed between area food pantries as well as the nonprofit, the Keller Market House, which supports local farmers, producers, and artisans, and gives them a business incubator space where they can sell their food, their artistry, and their products. We have 190 members in Destination Downtown Lancaster. That's a record number, and we couldn't be more proud of those folks that are investing in the work and are engaged in the work. We have 7 new public art sculptures in the downtown. We have 5 new downtown murals. And while these seem like great placemaking projects, I like to think of placemaking projects as economic development because they speak to the civic pride in a community, how a space looks, creates how a space feels. And whether you're a visitor or a citizen of Lancaster, you get a specific feel when you're in the downtown and you see that this community cares enough to create beautiful works of art in public spaces. And I will say that Center Alley is one of the most Instagrammable spaces now with that Gay Fad Studios mural that was executed this past year.
If you haven't had your city council selfie pic down there, please make arrangements to do so, because I do think it's all the rage. We were able to secure 90 cubic yards of mulch donated from our friends over at Kirkbride Land and Snow for our downtown cleanup. We're coming up on our next downtown cleanup day. I would encourage absolutely every city council member, please grab some folks from your ward and come down and take pride in cleaning up the heart of your city. It's a wonderful time to come together and do that work. We had we paid for 106 man-hours of snow and ice removal. There were a total of 8 snow events and 2 ice events, and we purchased over 16,000 pounds of salt to make sure that our sidewalks were safe and cleared. We had 322 volunteers providing over 1,200 volunteer hours of service. Then that again circles back to civic pride and the quality of our community, and the work that those folks are doing. That's over 1,200 hours of downtown service. Let's see. So at our annual gathering, we were able to give away some awards that were very exciting, and I think council will want to know. The 2020 Investment of the Year, again, because we were unable to have this event last year, went to Provisions Bakery and Deli, and that wonderful improvement that was made on the Old Four Reasons by Matt Brady. The 2021 Investment of the Year was actually that Gay Fad Studios mural project. And that was a collaborative project between artist Jason Annecy and his husband David Annecy, who donated hundreds and hundreds of volunteer hours and typically gets paid quite a pretty penny to do that work, but did it all out of the love of his community and the love of that story that speaks to who we are as Lancastrians with such a rich Glass history, Park National Bank, and then of course the Lancaster Sherman Rotary. And we meet on Wednesday mornings at Keller Market House at 7 o'clock if anyone would ever like to join us. Volunteer of the Year for 2021 was Eric Brown. Eric Brown is also a property owner in downtown Lancaster and has been working for almost 20 years with the downtown to ensure that it remains vibrant. Our 2021 Strategic Partner of the Year was Kirkbride Land and Snow Management. Our 2021 Business of the Year was Bootleggers of Lancaster. The 2021 Downtown Spirit Award was given to Bob's Backyard Barbecue. And I was able to do my 2020 Directors Award, which went to Interface Video, who is here this evening, at a time when Interface Video could have jacked up their prices when folks really needed those audiovisual services, and it was a way to keep us connected when we were at our lowest. They snapped into action and were innovative and helpful and came together with businesses, nonprofits, churches, and were able to really ground us and keep us coming together in innovative ways. So we were really grateful for that. And then I'm sure it will be no surprise that the 2021 Directors Award went to Mr. Downtown himself, Brad Hutchinson. And honestly, City Council time is not long enough for us to list all of the great things that Brad has done for downtown. But he has donated so much money back into the pockets of those businesses by encouraging people to come and invest in the retail shops, spend their money at restaurants, and paying 50% of the tab. He always picks up lunch for any volunteers for downtown cleanup day. He had a Santa Brad cookie hut at the Winterfest and ran a contest where he purchased 3 $1,000 gift certificates to give away when you submitted your receipts to downtown businesses. And it's just wonderful to have a private resident who cares so much about his community and really believes in the future of the city as a whole and also downtown. So we were really excited to present him with that award. Just want to give you a quick rundown of the upcoming events and hope that you will all be able to make it. Our next event is Chocolate Walk this Friday, April 1st. And City Council members, if you want to have a ticket, better hop on there as soon as you can because I think we only have a few tickets left. April 23rd, again, is Downtown Cleanup Day. That's Saturday morning. We'll meet at 8 a.m. down in the square. We usually have about 200 volunteers, and you'll get a snazzy t-shirt. Lots of great photo ops and just great opportunities to, roll up your sleeves and make your city brighter. Then we start our Saturday Cinema free movie series. That's on the second Saturday down in the square of every month, and that is May through August, that we do those family-friendly films with pre-movie activities for families. Then, of course, Friday, July 22nd is Art Walk. August 20th, we will be hosting Brewfest again in downtown Lancaster. September 25th, save the date for 250 plates. Again, that farm-to-table community dinner. It would be wonderful to see each and every one of you there. If you've not been, it's truly a magical evening to look down Bank Alley with those beautiful tables and be served food that was grown right here in our community by local chefs and restaurants, and prepared by local chefs and restaurants. For those of you that have pets, join us on October 1st for Fall Festival and Bark in the Park in the square. October 29th will be downtown Trick or Treat. And November 26th through December 3rd, we'll be celebrating all things small business with Small Business Celebration Week. And then December 3rd is the wonderful Winterfest and tree lighting that City Council President David Ohl began the tree lighting 10 years ago. And then you don't have to leave our community to go and celebrate New Year's Eve to have something exciting. We partner with Visit Fairfield County, the Lancaster City Parks, and the Glass Museum to host the Glass Town Countdown annually on New Year's Eve, where you can blow your own ornament at the Glass Museum and have that as a piece of that huge globe that we raise up at the stroke of midnight. There are fireworks, and it is truly a wonderful celebration of all things Lancaster that evening. Things are going really, really beautifully. I think I was just talking to Councilman Tom James about how I feel like we always talk about how things are going so well in Lancaster. It's the PR thing. But the last few years, every year, and I think we can all feel it. We can feel it in our gut. It's real. I think that we're experiencing before unseen levels of collaboration between nonprofits, private citizens, county government, city government, agencies that are at work, private businesses. All of these folks are working together to make sure that we move forward together. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's working. It's happening. So I've never been more proud to be a Lancastrian. And I thank you so much for listening this evening. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Everett? Well, thank you very much for all that you're doing and for continuing to push the engine of downtown forward each and every day. We appreciate it, and we appreciate you. Let's show her our appreciation for being here this evening. I'll just briefly mention one other thing. Amanda had talked a little bit about Rotary and the Sherman Club and the Lancaster Noon Club partner together each year on a Rotary Business Ethics Award. And this year, the winner of that award was Interface Video Productions, our broadcast and streaming partner. And so congratulations to Bob and his crew who are here as well. That is quite an honor and award that is given in memory of John Dye, who was a longtime Rotarian and loved the Business Ethics Award. And so congratulations to you and your team, Bob, and we're so thankful that we have this partnership together as we continue forward with the city. All right, are there any petitions or memorials?
There are none to be presented.
During this time, City Council sets time aside to allow the voters and taxpayers of the city to address us on any item or issue they would like. Is there anyone who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Everyone's looking around, not making eye contact. I'll say no. Thank you all for being here this evening. Are there reports of standing committees?
There is one, Finance Committee meeting dated March 28, 2022, submitted by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
A motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there reports of special committees?
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings this evening, so we'll move to the reading of resolutions, beginning with the second reading of temporary resolution 44-22.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the Pleasantville Road Water Line Replacement Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Mallon.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Ohl. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 44-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 44-22. Discussion, Mr. James.
Just as a quick reminder, certainly, this has to do with a water line that will go all the way out from Ewing Street to Wesley Way. It's approximately 6,000 feet of existing line is only about 6 inches diameter. They want to increase that to about 16 inches to start providing the water pressure and volume that's necessary for the growth in that area. And this is just for the engineering portion of it, and it's approximately $250,000.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. James.
Mr. President, thank you. I would like to make a motion at this time that council pass and gross and enter upon a written record temporary resolution numbered 44-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 44-22. Discussion, Mr. James.
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Motion to pass carries 8-0. Temporary resolution 45-22.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids for the Independence Boulevard Culvert Replacement Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Dole. At this time, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 45-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 45-22. Discussion, Mr. James.
Briefly, just as a reminder, this is a culvert that's very much undersized in that particular Independence Boulevard area, and this will help alleviate that problem.
Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. James.
Thank you, President Dole. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon our written record temporary resolution numbered 45-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 45-22. Discussion, Mr. James.
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 45-22 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 46-22.
Yes,
A resolution to accept the updated Coshocton Fairfield Licking Perry District Solid Waste Management Plan, offered by Ms. Sitterly, seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Ms. Sitterly.
thank you. Mr. President, as I may not be available next meeting, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of the the resolution temporarily numbered 46-22.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 46-22. Discussion, Ms. Sitterly.
Service Safety Director Martin gave a very thorough summary last time, so I just, as a reminder, it's a 5-year renewal.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Ms. Sitterly.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 46-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 46-22. Further discussion, Mrs. Sitterly.
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 46-22 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 48-22.
A resolution to approve certain expenditures in connection with business meetings, trainings, and community engagements, offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the second of 3 readings, please.
Second to 3 readings on temporary resolution 48-22. We now have first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 49-22.
A resolution to authorize the issuance of a then and now certificate to pay an invoice to Interface Video Productions, offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Ms. Kreitz.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of Resolution Temporary 4922, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 49-22. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This invoice arrived, or actually, it was in hand before the PO was made to cover it. Therefore, we need to issue a then and now and pay the invoice.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Hurley?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass and engross and enter upon the written record Resolution Temporary 4922, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 49-22. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
No, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 49-22 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 50-22.
A resolution authorizing the City of Lancaster to apply for the Meals on Wheels Older Adult Alternatives of Fairfield County, Inc., 2022 through 2023 grant, offered by Mr. Schoonover, seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 5022.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 50-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
Real quick, this is a transit piece. They apply for this grant every year. So we're just asking for suspension so they can move forward to apply for said grant.
Okay, thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross enter upon the written record temporary resolution 5022.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 50-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
Thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Abstain.
And Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 50-22 passes 7-0 with one abstention. Temporary resolution 51-22.
A resolution authorizing the filing of an application with the Ohio Department of Transportation for grants through the United States Department of Transportation Federal Transit Administration as authorized under the federal transit laws, financial assistance for other than urbanized areas, and funds available from the Ohio Public Transportation Grant Program and Ohio Elderly and Disabled Transit Fare Assistance Program 5339, 5339B, OTP2, RTP, STP, E&D, and any other grant that becomes available through ODOT and executing a contract with ODOT upon each grant application approval. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Ms. Sitterly.
You forgot elemental P. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary resolution 5122.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 51-22. Mr. Schoonover.
Couple reasons for suspension. One, so Teresa doesn't have to read that the second and third time. And the same as the previous resolution, these are annual grant pieces that transit applies for, and it's a huge percent of their budget. So we want to give them plenty of time to get those done and move forward.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Schoonover. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 5122.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 51-22. Mr. Schoonover,
No thanks.
any discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 51-22 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 52-22.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the Tiki Lane Pump Station renovation project. Offered by Mr. James and seconded by Ms. Teener.
Mr. James,
Thank you, President Dole. This is the first of two readings.
first two readings on temporary resolution 52-22. Temporary resolution 53-22.
A resolution to authorize the issuance of a then and now certificate to pay an invoice to Arlo Steel Corporation. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Ms. Sitterly.
Mr. Schoonover,
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 5322.
Second.
we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 53-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
We're asking for suspension. Mr. Hintz was here during finance. They missed an invoice for steel purchase to do some repairs on the salt hoppers for their trucks. So invoice in hand, and we're just wanting to get it paid.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 5322.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 53-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
No, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 53-22 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 54-22.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the design of the East Main Street Culvert Replacement Project. Offered by Mr. James and seconded by Ms. Teener.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Dole. This is the first of two readings.
First two readings on temporary resolution 54-22. Temporary resolution 55-22.
A resolution to increase receipts, appropriate from the unencumbered balance, and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the 3 Mill Street Improvement Levy Fund 2009. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Ms. Sitterly.
Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 5522.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 55-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
We're asking for suspension. We received reimbursement funds from OPWC as part of the West 6th Avenue paving project last summer. So ODOT wants to use those funds to move into the 2022 paving projects.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 5522.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 55-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
No thanks.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 55-22 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 56-22.
A resolution to authorize alternative composition of Lancaster City Council pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 731.01B. Offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Ms. Teener.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you. This is the first of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 56-22. Temporary resolution 57-22.
A resolution to amend permanent resolution 33-22, authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of pipe and fittings for use by the Division of Water. offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Gould. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 57-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 57-22. Discussion, Mr. James.
Sure. As Denise Cruz indicated in our meeting for finance, that the pricing for this particular quantity of pipe has gone up, and we need to get in line fairly quick to get it on order so we can actually get some this year. And that's why we're asking for suspension.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. James.
Thank you, President Gould. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon our written record temporary resolution 57-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 57-22. Further discussion, Mr. James.
Just briefly, I didn't mention the amount. It's for approximately $200,000
Thank you.
for the purchase of this particular pipe.
Very good. Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 57-22 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 58-22.
A resolution authorizing the City of Lancaster to apply for funding for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, offered by Ms. Sitterly and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Ms. Sitterly.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 5822.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 58-22. Discussion, Ms. Sitterly.
As Parks Director Mike Tharp explained, this is a request for $150,000 grant. It was not successful last year, but as Linda Bergudisser mentioned, it's worth a try.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Ms. Sitterly.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 5822.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 58-22. Discussion, Ms. Sitterly.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 58-22 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 59-22.
A resolution approving participation in the participation in the One Ohio Region 18 governance structure under the One Ohio Memorandum of Understanding and to declare an emergency, offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you. This is the first of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 59-22. Are there any further resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we'll move to the reading of ordinances, beginning with the second reading, temporary ordinance 8-22.
An ordinance to amend Lancaster Codified Ordinance LCO 4921, repeal and replace existing 49-21 for the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, MORPC Local Government Summer Intern Program, pay ordinance, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This will be the second of three readings, please.
Second to three readings on temporary ordinance 8-22. Temporary ordinance 9-22.
An ordinance to amend Lancaster Codified Ordinance 44-21, repeal and replace existing LCO 4421 for the transit personnel pay ordinance and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This will be the second of three readings, please.
Second to three readings on temporary ordinance 9-22. Temporary ordinance 10-22.
An ordinance to amend Lancaster Codified Ordinance 42-21 star, repeal and replace existing LCO 42-21 star for the non-union pay ordinance and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second of three readings, please.
Second to three readings on temporary ordinance 10-22. Temporary ordinance 11-22.
An ordinance to amend Lancaster Codified Ordinance 41-21, repeal and replace LCO 41-21 for the Fairfield County Municipal Court Judicial and Probation Personnel Pay Ordinance and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Second to three readings, please.
Second to three readings on temporary ordinance 11-22, temporary ordinance 12-22.
An ordinance to amend Lancaster Codified Ordinance 40-21, repeal and replace existing LCO 40-21 for the Fairfield County Municipal Court Management Professional Personnel Pay Ordinance and declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second to three readings, please.
Second to three readings on temporary ordinance 12-22. Temporary ordinance 13-22.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute all documents and pay any fees necessary to accept .775 plus minus acres of vacant land from Table Mountain Industries LLC, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, first of two readings, please.
First to two readings on temporary ordinance 13-22. Temporary ordinance 14-22.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor to acquire a permanent general utility easement, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
First of two readings, please.
First to two readings on temporary ordinance 14-22. Temporary ordinance 15-22.
An ordinance authorizing the law director to acquire 25-year, it seems like it should say a 25-year, okay, to acquire 25-year easements from the state of Ohio at Ohio University Lancaster and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Ms. Sitterly.
Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 1522.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading on temporary ordinance 15-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
We're asking for suspension. The previous 15-year agreement with the state has already expired, and they're antsy to get the new 25-year in place.
Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 1522.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 15-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
Thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 15-22 passes 8-0. Are there any further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we'll move on through the agenda. There is no tabled legislation. Is there any unfinished business that anyone would like to discuss tonight? If not, we'll move to new business. I know we have a couple of items. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion for the appointment of Clerk Sandy as proxy for Mr. James, Mr. Matlin, Mr. Stoughton, President Uhl, Mrs. Teener, Mr. Schoonover, Mr. McDaniel, to attend the Sunshine Laws mandatory training for 2022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to make the appointment of Clerk Sandy as proxy for those that were named within the motion. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
You want to take that one on?
The discussion part about why we had talked a little bit in finance that 3 members were not listed, Ms. Kreitz, Mr. Ehlers, and Ms. Sitterly, and this is because we often ask those folks to have the experience of going through the Sunshine Law training. It's a great opportunity to learn about all the things we're supposed to be doing from a transparency to the public standpoint, and then in future terms, you have opportunity to have Miss Sandy appointed to sit in for you, so it'll be fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Any further discussion on the motion? We need voice vote.
Probably should.
Voice. Okay.
Yeah.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
I suppose those 3 could have voted no. Motion to pass this particular motion passes 8-0. There it is.
Catchy.
All right, we're done.
Undefeated.
Undefeated. Very good. All right. Secondly, it's my distinct pleasure and honor to appoint Mr. Stoughton to the, oh Lord,
Tax Incentive Review Committee.
yeah, council, I think. The tax, you're trying to make it so it's not official, Tax Incentive Review Council for the coming however long, I guess we need him to serve. Is there a motion to do so? Oh, I don't have to have a motion. I just need to do it. It's a lifetime appointment. Congratulations, Mr. Stoughton. Thank you for your willingness to serve. This is an appointment of the president of council, and so no vote is needed, and we appreciate your willingness to serve. All right, is there any other new business to come before
Can I even have a
Lancaster City
speech? Can
Council?
I say I'm honored or anything like that, or?
Sure, you
Thank
get
you.
5 seconds.
All right, I'm honored.
Very,
Thank you.
you're welcome. All right. Other new business tonight? If not, we'll ask that anyone's hand, no new business? Okay. Please read the announcement of our scheduled meetings.
The next regular scheduled meeting is April the 11th. The meeting following is April 25th, both meetings here in council chambers at 6:30 PM. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. With the exception of finance, the others will happen at the 1897 conference room. Public Works, April 8th at 7:30 AM. Finance, April the 11th at 6 PM here in council chambers. Water pollution, April 13th at 8 AM. IT Telecom, April 15th at 7:30 AM. Economic Development, April 21st at 7:30 AM. And finally, the Finance, April 25th at 6 PM here in council chambers.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills?
There are. I have 2 different bills. The first bill is for publication of legislation payable to PNC for publication in the MNCO for $366.20. The second bill is payable to PNC for something purchased at Office Mart. When I say something, it's the covers for the proclamations. I purchased really nice ones. $19.18.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to pay the bills.
We have a motion and a second to pay the bills. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there a need for an executive session this evening? Not a motion to adjourn is in order.
Mr. President, I would like to make that motion that we adjourn.
A motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please remember to sign your legislation. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening.